I know people who never work with more than one layer in their InDesign document. They manage all their objects using send to back and bring to front. Now, there's nothing really wrong with that technically, other than it will eventually drive you insane, especially in a complicated layout. No, it's much better to create at least a couple of layers in your document and then use them to organize your objects. Now, every document starts with one layer called Layer 1, and you can see that by opening up your Layers panel. It's over here in the dock. There's Layer 1, and all my objects are currently on that layer. Let's start organizing this document by creating more layers. You can do that in a couple of different ways. You could go to the Layers panel menu and choose New Layer, and that brings up the New Layer dialog box, and now you can give it a name such as Graphics. Then I'll just hit the OK button, and now my new layer is inside the Layers panel. Another way to make a new layer is just to click the New Layer button at the bottom of the Layers panel. But when you do that, you just get this generic named layer like Layer 3. And I don't like that, so I'm going to delete that layer by selecting it and then clicking the little trash can icon down here. Instead, when I make a new layer with this New Layer button, I hold down the Option or Alt key. That way, it forces InDesign to open the New Layer dialog box, and I can name my layer. I'll call this one Text. Okay, now I've got 3 layers, so how do I get my objects onto those layers? Well, I'm going to select one of the objects on my page, this little icon over here, and you'll see that in the Layers panel, this little blue square lights up. That little blue square is a proxy for whatever is selected on the page right now, and I can drag that blue square up from one layer to another. I'll drag it up to the Graphics layer, and when I let go of the mouse button, you'll see that that object is now on that layer. You may have also noticed that the object changed from blue to red. Now, the object itself didn't change, but the frame edge highlighting did. The edge highlighting always reflects the color of the layer, and as you can see, each layer has a unique color. This Graphics layer is red, so the frame edge highlighting is red too. But of course, that edge highlighting does not affect how this document will print or export to PDF. It only changes it on screen for reference. All right, let's go ahead and move all these other icons. I could shift-click on each one of them, but that's a little tedious, so I'm just going to drag a marquee with my selection tool over everything on this page, and then I'm going to shift-click on what I don't want to include. For example, I'll shift-click on the text frame and this background image. Now I'll come over to the Layers panel and drag that little blue proxy icon up to the Graphics layer, and all of those items are on that layer now. Now let's handle this text frame. I'll click out here where there's no objects to deselect everything, and then click once on that text frame. I'm going to move that to the text layer by dragging that little blue proxy icon. Now when I did that, you can see that it moved on top of the graphics. And of course, that's because the text layer is sitting on top of the graphics layer over here in the Layers panel. So I'd like to move all the text down below the graphics layer, and I can do that by clicking and dragging this whole text layer down in the Layers panel below the graphics layer. When I let go of the mouse button, the text frame moves down as well. Now, I do need to point out something here. Let's say one of these icons on the graphics layer was actually over here, but it's supposed to be behind that icon, not in front of it. Well, in the last movie, I showed how you could go up to the Object menu, choose from the Arrange submenu, and then choose Send to Back. And that worked, but it didn't go behind the text frame or that graphic in the background. It's important to remember that all of those commands in the Arrange menu refer to the current layer. So Send to Back doesn't mean send behind all the objects, it just means send to the back of this particular layer. I just wanted to be clear about that. Okay, back to the Layers panel. It actually gives us even more control over our document. For example, I can click on this little eyeball icon to hide all of those objects on that layer. If I click again, they come back. Same thing with the text layer. It hides or shows all the objects on that layer. In a complicated layout, when you're trying to manipulate certain objects, being able to hide all the distracting objects is really helpful. Now, another thing you might want to do in a complicated layout is to lock the layers. I'm going to click in the second column next to the text layer, and you can see a little padlock appear. I'll be talking about locking later in this chapter, but you can see now that anything that's on a locked layer cannot be selected. For example, if I try and click on this text frame, it doesn't work. It clicks right through it and selects the object, this big graphic frame behind it. Okay, couple more layer tricks you should know. One is, if I want to select all the objects on a particular layer, I can just click that little selection proxy square over here in the right column. That's really useful. But remember, layers are spread-wide, not page-wide. That is, this selects all the objects on all the pages in this spread, not just the page we're looking at. Now, the second trick I should point out is if you double-click on a layer, up comes the Layer Options dialog box. And this offers all kinds of options. For example, I could change the name, the color, or even various behaviors. For example, I'm going to turn off the Print Layer checkbox. Now, any objects on this layer will display on screen, but if I print or export a PDF, they just won't be there. The graphics here will just disappear. I'll click OK, and you can see a little visual indication of that up here in the Layers panel, because the word graphics is now in italic. Italic layer names mean they're non-printing. Now, as you can see, building and using layers is not required, but it really helps you organize your documents. But whether you use lots of layers or only one, the Layers panel has one more trick up its sleeve. It lets you see and manipulate your stack of objects inside the layer. And you can do that by clicking this little triangle. Here's a list of all the objects that are currently on Layer 1. Now, all of these are over on the right side of the spread, so I'll just scroll over here. But now you can see I can toggle the visibility of that text right on the first page, just by turning off and on this little eyeball icon. This also gives us fine control over our stacking order, because I can just drag these objects up and down. For example, I'll drag this down here, and you'll see it goes behind all those other objects. As you can probably tell, I'm a fanatic for having total control over each and every object on my page. After all, without control, how can you manage your design? I really encourage you to use this Layers panel, especially when you're working with complex layouts.